Video today. Today I'm going to do a topic which is refinement and grooming. I'm going to try and distinguish between the two. And I'm going to try and go into that in detail before I go into Jira and Azure boards and show you how you would run a ceremony for refining and grooming in there. So my name is Alex. If you've not watched the videos on cards or backlogs or iterations, sprints, or even how to navigate around these tools, it's probably worth just going back to the website here and have a look at those and see if you can't. Just watch those first, because today I'm going to refer to a lot of the concepts which I've already introduced in those videos. They're all under 5, well, between 5 and 10 minutes. But now let's jump in and do a refinement and grooming in Agile, what it means in Agile, and also how to do it in Azure and Azure boards. So let's jump in and have a look at what a backlog looks like. Remember, this is the backlog. This is the customer value backlog because it's purple. Doesn't matter which system you're in, it's purple. In Jira and Azure boards, it's both purple. But in Jira, it will be called epics, as opposed to Azure boards is more for scale, so they're called features. So when we're talking about grooming, we're really talking about looking after the backlog, making the backlog look nice. So that might be getting it in order, making sure everything's nice and tidy, making sure the states are up to date, all of that sort of stuff. The stuff that's visible on the backlog, so a high level, really helicopter view. So if you're talking about refinement, then you're more likely to be looking at cards. So when I went through the other day and talked through cards, I showed cards just like this. I didn't go into any of the detail in the card, but all cards have this kind of detail in them. So refinement is really getting some of this detail up to date. Not the sprint field, not necessarily even the side field, but definitely this big one here. Get that refined. Make sure the title's tidy and make sure a definition is done on the card. And that's what refinement is. You put those two things together and you've got a nice looking backlog with some quality cards in there. That's really what you're trying to look for. Now, if you were to do Scrum training, which is what most of the stuff that I'm covering is Scrum, this would be combined with your planning session. And we'd be puristic about it and go, well, you should really learn from your sprint and go into your next sprint and really have your cards from there. But I'm going to tell you my experience working across 5 organizations, dozens and dozens and dozens of teams. It does pay to have a well-refined and well-groomed backlog. That can be modified at the end of a sprint and moving into the next sprint, but you really want the foundations there. So that's what I'm going to cover with you now. And let's jump back to this card. So you got this card. This is the customer value card, probably bigger than a sprint. It's an epic or a feature. So let's just have a look at what are the cards we want to refine, because we want to be looking at some others. So if you go back to my cards, the things inside the epic or the feature. Now, these are always called user stories. These can be done in a sprint, something the value that can be delivered in a time box. And then inside that, there are tasks. Well, I'm really going to focus on trying to get everything refined, but predominantly, I really want to see the user stories and the value refined, and I want to see the user stories refined. I'm not so fussed, and this is blue because this is Jira, yellow if it's Azure boards. I'm not really fussed about getting your tasks refined. That is very much an in-sprint activity to do. If you want to make your task list, you might do that before the sprint if you've got a lot of collaboration that needs to go on with guys, but really I'd leave that to be in the sprint. When I'm talking about grooming and refinement, I'm talking about the customer value tier, making sure we understand what value we're delivering and the incremental way of delivering that, so those user stories. So that's really what we're talking about refining. I'm going to put all of this onto one slide at once now. So we're going to refine the cards. Always there's going to be a one-to-many. Remember, we're going to have one epic or one feature, and there are going to be many user stories below. There's a one-to-many between. I've left this on here, these tasks. So you might have many tasks that will be delivered as part of the story. Like I say, I would do that in sprint if you're doing it at all. If you've got close collaboration, you don't really need to refine your tasks, but you do that. You wouldn't groom that backlog. So you would groom your value backlog, make sure you got your priority order, make sure your states are up to date, and you groom your user story backlog. So the backlog would be a subset of those, and you make sure those are in order. I'll show you that in a second in the tools. Your tasks, you just don't groom. It's a to-do list. That would be burnt down pretty quickly in a short period of time. Everyone should know that task list called the back of the hand anyway. You don't really need the systems. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about refinement and grooming. Yeah, you can do one without the other or vice versa, but you generally do them together. You go through, refine your cards, and then when you've refined your cards, there'll be some new details. So you have to just quickly check where they are in your backlog. You should be grooming your backlog constantly, and you should probably do your refinement at least once a week, maybe once a sprint. It's always the stuff. It's not just down the bottom of the backlog. It's the whole backlog from the top. Are these states up to date? That's what you'd be doing with grooming. All of this would really be looked after by your product owner. We're at that stage. We're not in sprint stuff. I talk about it could be a ceremony. I would certainly make it on cadence because we'll talk about cadence one day. It's a benefit to the team, but really it's not an in-sprint ceremony, so it can kind of be done whenever you need to. But I would always have it on cadence. Okay, that's the theory behind refinement and grooming. I'm going to jump into some of the tools now. Let's jump into Jira first. All right, so this is the Jira screen here. I'm going to float around a little bit. What we're really talking about is here are the epics down here. So they're the big things. Here are the stories. This story's in sprint, so you wouldn't really be refining something that's in sprint. That's in progress. This is prior to them going to in progress. And then if I was to click on any one of these stories, this story 2 here is highlighted, there are tasks under there. So they all marry up. But what we'd be doing is we'd be clicking on this story here, and we'd be seeing here, okay, it's part of an epic, part of this. You probably wouldn't even start there. You'd start by creating these epics and refining those. So this is called progressive elaboration. We start with the big things and we break those down. One of the groups I work with is breaking down rocks so we can carry them. So these big rocks over here, these epics, we click on those and start to refine those. Or we can click up here and go, okay, let's make sure this one here, this epic, SP3, is well refined. So we jump in the epic. Well, it's not got a description. Make sure that's refined. Get a description in there. Make sure you understand it. And then try and do these two down here. So we click on one of these and try and refine that. So I'm just going to go back and show you that again. So in here, you'd make sure your epic was up to date before you'd even probably refine and even define what your stories are. You'd need that description. And I've run a lot of sessions with individuals trying to train and coach people to do this refinement. Anyone who skips the session where we write this description in and then tries to define what stories they want, they can't do it. You've got to really understand what the definition of done is before you can start talking about how you're going to deliver it. So if we're here, we click on the story, and that allows us to refine the story. Then you would start to say, well, how are we going to do that? What tasks are we going to do? You take the story into the sprint and do that. You wouldn't go to that detail. That's just in time, and the progressive elaboration doesn't need to be done. It's once it's in the sprint. Certainly if you've got an experienced team. If your team haven't got really an idea of how they're going to do it, you might want to do that in advance to make sure it can be done in the sprint, in a sprint. Okay, so that's all done before the sprint. Now in Azure boards, it's very similar, different interface of course, but we've got the same things. We've got the customer value here. Here it's called a feature, not an epic. And then underneath there are stories that were to the side a second ago. They were here and the epics were up here. So I can click on a story just as I did before. This time it opens in modal though. So if I do click on a story, it will bring up, I beg your pardon, if I click on a feature, I should have clicked on a feature. If I click on the feature because I want to go from the top down. That was my mistake just then. Always start from the top down. Don't start on the stories. Start on the feature. Read the description. Make sure the description's there. If you're refining, make sure the cards are up to date. So, and then start to define the stories underneath. Again, we've got 2 stories already predefined. They shouldn't be there unless you've got the description. So story 2, I'll click on story 2 and then we can refine that. And then again, the tasks are down here if I want to further refine that. I wouldn't necessarily do that. So that's how you do it. So what you're doing really is you're doing that and then you're going to go on and groom the backlog. So you do that for a limited time slot, maybe 45 minutes. Don't take it too long. This can be really, really brain intensive work. So 45 minutes is good. And then once you've got your cards all nicely refined, it's probably a good idea just to go and see where they sit in the backlog because things might have changed. So in Jira, you can literally just move these things around. You can drag and drop these stories here. You can drag and drop these epics here. Remember, higher priority at the top. You might have done that before and gone, this is what I think my priority. In the end, you just go and reconfirm. And then you're going to be ready for sprint planning. It's exactly the same process in Azure boards. You can just move these stories up and down. You can move the features up and down. So then you're ready for sprint planning because you're getting your backlog, well-refined cards with good definition of done on, well-refined customer value that you're delivering to, all nicely ordered by priority, ready for sprint planning. And that's why your product owner runs that with the team. Your sprint planning will be simple. And what you'll find, you get good refinement, good grooming, you will get good sprint planning. You get good sprint planning, you'll get good stand-ups. Get all that right, you deliver stuff, and then your review is much easier. All right, okay. Hope that was useful to you guys. That's refinement and grooming and some examples in Jira and Azure boards. Look after yourselves.